So thank you everyone for coming. So this presentation I gave about 3 years ago in 2019, and it was originally made to prepare for Cube of Truth or maybe TV outreach that we're doing right here. And this is actually a video from one that happened before that. But I have since heavily modified the presentation, and now it's more made for the purpose of preparing you for talking about veganism anywhere. And maybe not really an outreach, because if you want to get ready to do veganism in a activism setting like this, at a Cube of Truth, or does everyone know what a Cube of Truth is, or TV outreach? Okay. So there are more relevant videos for that, namely the Holding Non-Vegans Accountable Part 3, released by Anonymous for the Voiceless. I highly recommend that. This is more for how to talk to your family and friends about veganism. So yeah, about me, not really important. I just want to say I have no qualifications that make me uniquely qualified to talk at you about this. And everything I say here is not necessarily my opinion, but more like a hypothesis. I don't have any data to prove that the methods I'm advocating here are the best, but I want to try them out. And what I'm proposing here is a little bit different probably from activism that you may have done and the way that you've talked about veganism in the past. So first of all, why is it important to talk about veganism? Because it's the only way that we're going to fix the problems that animal agriculture causes. So people are not used to being asked to personally change something about their life to affect bigger issues. Usually the global issues are not our job to fix. Ending the war in Ukraine, really what are we going to do that? We can protest, whatever, but ultimately it's not up to us whether stuff like that goes on or not. That's not the case with animal agriculture. It happens or stops happening because of our choices. So it's also, it can get kind of complicated. Seeing something on a billboard, seeing a march go by, yeah, can alert people to the fact that there's a problem, but this is an issue that usually requires an in-depth conversation. And the best people to have that conversation are people you know. Most people who have gone vegan have done so because they watched a documentary, but the second highest percentage of people who have gone vegan did so because they were talked to by a friend or a family member. So really, it is up to you. There is no one else that is coming to the animal's rescue. It is your job to prevent, to mitigate the largest atrocity that is happening right now. So you're all probably definitely familiar with this. The fundamentals of veganism, basically, this is the definition given by the Vegan Society back in 1945, a way of living that seeks to exclude as far as practicable and possible all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. The fundamentals of the vegan conclusion are very simple. Animals are sentient and experience the world like we do. They don't want to be killed, and we can get all the nutrition that we need to survive on a diet of plants alone, to survive and thrive. So our dietary choices directly affect the fates of non-human animals. If we buy a piece of meat, an animal will be killed to replace that piece of meat on the shelf. Now, of course, a cow produces many pieces of meat, so you have to buy a few. But the fact remains, suppliers pay very close attention to the demand, how much meat is actually bought. So my hypothesis is that most objections to these very simple conclusions aren't really ever direct objections. They are attempts to distract, right? They're attempts to distract oneself from these very simple conclusions. Most people agree with what was on the previous page with the fundamentals of veganism. most arguments against veganism are attempts to deflect away from these fundamentals rather than attempts to contradict them. You should encourage the vegan conclusion by returning this conversation to the fundamentals. I should say, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to interrupt me at any time, because I'd rather you ask the question while it's fresh in your mind, while it's relevant to what I'm saying, than to wait for the end. But there will also be a chance at the end. Yeah?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I think you should be more confident and say you are qualified.
Sure. I am qualified. I'm not especially qualified. That is to say that I'm not a better vegan than any of you are. I'm not necessarily better at outreach or anything else than any of you. That's what I meant by that. Right. So the reason people try so hard to distract themselves from the conclusions that we're trying to get them to see is that asserting that veganism is the right way comes with some baggage. It's to say that they're responsible for unnecessary killing. They're not an animal lover. They're choosing to be responsible for oppression. And even if you go vegan right now, you have to face the fact that you have been responsible for all these things, that you have played a part in the suffering and unnecessary killing of others, of animals. And that's a hard thing to admit. And beyond that, you have to make a change, and this change will be something that you have to adhere to every day, every meal for the rest of your life. And change is scary, right? We're all vegan, some people are new vegans, but we know that the hardest part of being vegan is going vegan. Once you've been doing it for a few months, a year, it becomes second nature. But the change, looking at it from the other side, is pretty difficult. Well, it seems difficult. You know, the anxiety around it is harder than it actually will be. So this is one thing that I've had to update in the last 3 years, because back then there were more common excuses. Now I'm starting to see this again. This went out of style around 2015, but I've seen it come back. People will start talking about situations that are completely foreign to their actual experience. What about hunters, sustenance hunters? What about sustenance fishermen? What about wild animals that are obligate carnivores? Are you saying that they need to go vegan? Now, another update to our doctrine that I want to suggest is to not answer this directly. So, it used to be that we would say, well, you know, if you need to, you know, you can hunt, maybe we can help them go vegan someday. I don't want to do that anymore. I think it might be more effective to sidestep all that and instead confront the distraction itself. Ask people, why are you talking about a situation that has nothing to do with you? Why are you trying not to think about what I just said to you? Why are you trying to not think about your situation? I don't even have to ask you. You know that your situation has nothing to do with this. Assuming you're not going and doing outreach in Yukon and talking to a sustenance hunter, which, you know, I never have, and I don't think you will either. Yeah?
Can I take notes?
No, you may not take notes.
I just want to see you.
Oh yeah, of course. Also, I will, assuming that my camera is working, I will be posting this on YouTube, Facebook, so you can watch this again if you'd like. So, the headline on this page says welfarism is the most common distraction. It's not the most common distraction that people who aren't vegan will come up with anymore. But I still call it the most common distraction because it's something that animal rights activists themselves will often promote. If you look closely at the big headline-grabbing activism events, even in the past few years, pay attention to the message that you might receive if you weren't already vegan. They'll break into a farm or slaughterhouse, maybe shackle themselves to, the activists might shackle themselves to the production line, maybe sit in the facility, and they will always talk about the treatment talk about and show the treatment of animals. That doesn't really produce the opportunity to talk about the idea that the killing is unnecessary, the exploitation, the apprehending of a mother's milk to sell to people instead of feed to their baby. You can't really talk about that from videos that show the conditions that animals are in before they arrived at the slaughterhouse. So, Direct Action Everywhere is an organization that calls itself an abolitionist group, but at the same time, one of the ingredients of their plan is to get meat eaters on their side without getting them to go vegan first. And so they can't really promote veganism. In fact, their leaders have said that promoting veganism should not necessarily happen because that's not the path they want to take. The path that they imagine is to, through welfare steps, maybe make animal agriculture so expensive that it makes it less available. But welfarism is not a step towards animal liberation. And the reason I say that is because you're essentially suggesting, you're allowing the idea that if only we treat animals nicely for a little while before we kill them, maybe it's okay. So rather than allowing, so these are what we would, this is what we used to say in response to, when we do activism or when we talk to our family members. One line, I know exactly what they mean when they say, I'm on your side, or I really appreciate what you guys are doing. When we're standing downtown holding up the screens, wearing the masks, whatever we're doing, people will thank us for what we're doing. And when they talk like that, I know exactly where the conversation is going to go. They believe that we're there to protest factory farms, which, by the way, I think we need to stop using the phrase factory farms, because again, it implies that there is a right way, that as long as it's not a factory farm, then it's an okay farm, it's a nice farm. There are no nice farms. We should stop saying factory farms. I think we should stop targeting individual companies. We should never say the name of the company, Smithfield, whatever, breaking my own rule, but we should never say this company does this to animals, because that implies, that allows the idea that there are some companies that are better. And we can't be doing that because the unnecessary killing is the problem. So yeah, people ask for some petition to sign. People are used to animal rights activists promoting animal welfare. And that's how we've done it for decades, ever since, even since the Vegan Society first formed in 1945, that's how it has always been. And it's only just in the past 5 or so years that even organizations like PETA have taken a consistent abolitionist stance. In fact, they still have on their website an article written either by or in conjunction with Temple Grandin, who's she works with the meat industry to develop humane slaughter methods. PETA has an article where they interview her on their website from 5 years ago. They probably wouldn't put that up now, but animal rights activists have done so much damage, I think, by promoting welfarism, to the point where people will automatically assume that that's what the conversation that we still want to have is. And we need to do the work to derail that and start promoting the idea that unnecessary killing is wrong, no matter what happens before, no matter how the killing happens. Yeah?
You said it's been going on even since the founding, since the Vegan Society.
Yeah.
But you said it's starting to shift in the last 5 to 6 years. What do you think has changed since then?
I don't know. And maybe it's just because I only associate with people who want to do it this way. Maybe it's selection bias on my part. Have you seen that at all?
I've seen the abolitionist stance.
Yeah.
I think it has been there since at least the 90s, because that Randy Egan, Jay Conroy.
Yeah.
He always talk about these abolitionist things we did in the 90s, so that's kind of what I've seen.
Well, okay, let's since you brought him up, let's talk about Jake Conroy and
Okay.
the SMAC group. So what they focus on is disrupting the facilities that do animal testing and also maybe produce meat as well. But Jake Conroy was mostly focused on animal testing, which is fine. I mean, that's definitely something we should work on ending as well. But I believe that to target the companies that produce that directly perform the animal exploitation, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And whether that is called abolitionist by the people participating in it, I think such a strategy is fundamentally welfarist. Because say you shut down a company, say you somehow shut down McDonald's, and that's all you do. A bunch of companies will step in to fill the vacuum that has been created by that victory. And it would be a victory, but it would only be short-lived because the demand would still be there. And the suppliers, or the potential suppliers, would know that they will make more money now selling meat and eggs and dairy and all the other stuff because this huge supplier has just somehow disappeared. So
That's an interesting perspective because I grew up like watching his talks about pressure campaigns.
Yeah.
Like, I want to do that someday.
yeah, so that's how I started in activism as well. The first group that I seriously was a part of was called the Humane League. And what we do is we would call, like among other things, we would call into stockholder meetings and disrupt those and stand in front of restaurants. And we would get these companies to release welfare statements, just like this one, just like this one, just like this one. All of the most evil companies will have something like this on their website. And that is because these companies love animal welfare. They love the idea that it can be okay to produce meat. And the way I see pressure campaigns is it's like pushing on a balloon, putting pressure on the outside of a balloon. What'll happen? The total pressure in the balloon will only increase a little bit because rubber is elastic. The balloon will get bigger on the other side when you push on one side of the balloon, right? And that I think is a simile for what happens when we target a company. Even if we were to somehow have enough vegans to target every company at once, even if we were to collapse every single meat producer and distributor in the world, somehow, we're not going to do it, but somehow we're able to do it, that victory would only be short-lived because the demand would still be there. So I say we should stop doing that. We should stop shifting the blame towards the companies because the companies only do what people pay them to. And they're not going to let themselves be disrupted. If we somehow are able to start damaging McDonald's, they'll call the police on us. And if the police don't work, they'll call the military on us. We're not going to do it that way as long as the demand exists. And the counterattack against vegans will be supported by the general population because 95% of people still eat meat. So, as much as I would like pressure campaigns to be able to work, as much as I would like to be able to forcefully smash the animal agriculture industry, to take a hammer and smash down every McDonald's, every animal testing lab, every slaughterhouse, it's not going to work that way. And as horrible as it is, as frustrating as it is, we're basically in a negotiation situation. We're hostage negotiators. That doesn't sound as empowering as the other ways, but that's realistic. And I don't think activism should feel empowering anyway, because we're fighting a losing battle. 150 billion animals are killed a year. It shouldn't feel good to us, and it shouldn't feel good to have to negotiate with people like we have to do. But it's not about us. It's not about our pride. It's not about what feels right. It's so important that we do it the right way, and we collapse the industry if we can by removing the demand. And there's other reasons I have that I'll get to at the end of this presentation for thinking the way I do about that. So yeah, I think we've done that to death. So this doesn't really fit anywhere else in the presentation, but this is another distraction that people come up with. How many times have you heard, I'm mostly vegan, or I don't eat very much meat anymore, or I'm mostly vegetarian, I've cut way back on my meat consumption? It's all a lie. The only reason people are saying that is because they're confronted with the idea that it's wrong. They're not actually reducing their meat intake. We have research, that's one of the few conclusions I'm going to say here that have research to back it up. The ironic thing is that a person who commits to eating less meat is less likely to adhere to that commitment than a person who commits to going vegan is to adhere to that commitment. That is to say, the stricter your commitment, the more likely you are to adhere to it long term. Now, there's research going around, it's not actual research, it's a distortion on some research saying that the claim will be, you'll see this online, that most people who go vegan end up abandoning it. That's not true. That's based on a study by Funnelytics that lumps in vegans with meat reducers, with people who plan to only reduce their meat intake for a little while. It lumps all those people in together and says, yeah, this whole group, 50 or whatever % of them, will not be doing it a year later. Yeah?
So you mentioned before that the stricter your your diet or whatever, the more likely you are to go through with it, stick with it.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any basis for that? Like, is it just like personal?
Yes. So I'll post a link to this under the YouTube video and then I'll email it to the club, I guess. But this is the research.
Oh, okay.
I highlighted the relevant conclusions here. But similar research already existed for other habits that people want to stop. For smoking, for instance, not for all drugs, but for some. So doctors recommend, I forget if it's smoking or alcohol, one of those, that quitting all at once is the most reliable way to quit. That if you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day and you go down to smoking 1 cigarette a day, that's not going to work as well as if you commit to completely cutting out smoking alongside, I won't get into that, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense intuitively as well. If you're acting on a belief that unnecessary killing is wrong, and yet you act against that belief every once in a while, every day, every week, every month, once a year on your birthday or whatever, you're attacking your own values. You're attacking the idea that animals deserve that respect. And eventually it'll collapse. And that's what this research, it's not rigorous. I don't think they even have a p-value or anything. It's not a lot of people. So I'd still maybe call this a hypothesis, but it's looking like this is the way. And this is the answer I have for meat producers. And I have more, again, coming up, more reasons to completely cut out meat. Non-vegans, people I talk to like to accuse us of being all or nothing. What does that mean? Are we going to say that if you're not going to go 100% vegan, then you might as well just keep eating meat? No, we are not going to say that. We're going to say go vegan. Now, if they want to choose to do something less than that, then that's their choice. But we as vegans, as people who understand this stuff, shouldn't enable that. We shouldn't congratulate them for continuing to eat a little bit of meat and say that that's the end of the journey. Because it's better for everyone involved to be consistent with your values. So here's another distraction. This is an instance of the old cards that we would pass out at the Cube of Truth. And notice it says animals, environment, health. Now, this is because we used to argue all three of these. And it is true that going vegan is definitely the best diet for the environment. Was Matthew Nagra here a few weeks ago? SFU, okay. I'm not going to talk about health at all because I'm really, really bad at it. So honestly, this is more for the YouTube video. Talking about the environment is hard. So you should be ready to talk about these things because many objections come from these standpoints. What if being vegan makes me less healthy? This is still recording. Good. Okay. What if being vegan makes me less healthy? I said I'm not going to talk about health. Just 10 seconds. I trust dietitians. Every nutrient that humans need that we can't produce in our own bodies can be obtained without consuming animal products, and we can get everything we need to thrive at every stage of life. If you have any questions about that, contact Matthew Nagra. Honestly, I'm not the person to ask about that. Also do your own research. Usually if you look at the claims that meat eaters are making, ask them where they found it. Maybe they'll give you a study, and actually, usually if you read the studies, you'll see that they're not drawing the conclusion that they thought they were. I said I was going to go into that, and I won't. Environmental stuff, that's where it gets tricky. This has been going around a lot. The claim is that 86% of global livestock feed intake is made of materials that are inedible by humans, and so it's efficient for the environment to use livestock to convert this into food. But a lot of that is coming from land that could be used to grow food for humans. It's only 19% that comes from the parts of food that are made for humans that we cannot consume. And the reality of something called trophic level energy increase means that we only get about 10% back from animals of the food that we feed them. So that's not what this presentation is about, but this is going to sound arrogant, but if you have any questions about environmentalism, contact me. I'm the best person I know to deal with this. But
agriculture.
Yes,
Study.
you too. But yeah, it takes a lot of practice too, and also arguing online is the best place to hone your skills on this, because you can look it up, but it is difficult if they're using that as the objection, if they're using that to argue that you're somehow killing more animals by being vegan. But anyway, I've wasted more time on that. So the anonymous for the voiceless cards have gone from this to this, removing the environment and the health. And the reason everyone now agrees that was a good idea, we kind of complained at the beginning, but the reason for that is that if you're arguing against somebody's preconceived notions, they will focus on the weakest part of your argument. And if the argument is that we should stop killing animals out of basic decency, then saying we should also stop killing animals because of your own health or because of the environment kind of weakens that position. Like, we wouldn't say that, we wouldn't have said that we should end slavery because it's not the most efficient way to pick cotton or sugar. And I want to digress here for a minute. I used to be very afraid of comparing human issues to animal issues. I will do that now because we're not equating animals to humans, but we are comparing animals to humans because in a lot of very important ways, animals are similar to humans. In all of the ways that matter. In our desire to be free, in our desire to continue living. In every way that matters, we are similar to animals. And also, the oppression that we visit onto animals comes from the same mindset that we use to oppress humans. Specifically, the idea that we are very different from them, and therefore we have the right to oppress them. And of course, in the case of animals, we are in fact different, but again, in the ways that matter, we are the same. So that's what I say about that. And I think it's actually useful to kind of troll people out by doing that. They'll say, well, no, how dare you, that's not the same. Well, ask them, why is it not the same? In what relevant way is it not the same? We kill, again, 150 billion land animals, an uncounted number of fish every year. If you want to say it's not the same, I'll say it's even worse. This isn't just an atrocity, this is the biggest atrocity that is happening right now. Yeah, also, the reason we should stop talking about the environment and health, except to answer objections that are rooted in those topics, is because going vegan is not going to, you personally, going vegan is not going to noticeably affect the environment. And eating a chicken breast once in a while isn't going to noticeably affect your health. But it will kill an animal every time you do it. So, again, I'll hammer this more at the end of the presentation because the individuality of the problem and the solution is something that I really want to emphasize, and I think it's absent from most people's activism. But the uniqueness of the problem, the individuality of the problem is best served by talking about the animals. And so that's what we should do. So, yeah, doing activism is hard, especially the most important settings, which is where you'll be doing it with your family and friends, people who are close to you, who are important to you. And yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about how I remain confident in every conversation about veganism. So I'm going to play a clip from my favorite movie, which is called Carnage: Swallowing the Past. You've heard of it?
Yeah, I've watched it, yeah.
Okay, how did you find it?
Streamed it illegally somehow.
Yeah, it has to be streamed illegally because
I can't find it otherwise.
Yeah. Well, the reason for that is that it's a movie that only showed on BBC iPlayer. I think it's since been taken down. It is only legal to watch it in England or the United Kingdom. Anyway, I have stolen it too, and here's a clip from that movie. So this is a fictional activist named Troy King James, and I'll play a little bit. So the premise of the documentary is it's not really a documentary, it's a mockumentary. It takes place in the future, and it shows how the world, how England at least, went vegan. And I think it takes place in the year 2067. Anyway, this is, I think, the year 2035, and this is a fake interview, yeah?
We were actually just talking about doing a documentary screening with this. Would you recommend?
Yes. This is the best documentary for so many reasons.
Could you drop the link? Because like the one
Yes, I will.
because
Yes.
like it was like really bad quality and stuff.
Don't we have Tristan, the British?
No, but if it's only available in UK, it might even if you have a UK camera.
Yeah. You'll have to VPN. There's a link on Pastebin, which, yes, I will paste it on the YouTube description and send it to the club.
Thank you.
Anyway, here's a clip from that movie.
But veganism is just extreme. It's narrow-minded, it's judgmental,
What's
it's
extreme? Look, if you and
self-satisfied.
I were in a field drinking beetroot juice and somebody walked in and started sucking on the breasts of a cat, who's the maniac? It isn't just the human animal that has an interest in his life. It isn't just the human animal who feels a deep connection to his mother. It isn't just the human animal who would rather be loved than be alone, rather be free than be enslaved, rather live than be killed.
But vegans are still going to have to convince an awful lot of people.
You have to stop diminishing us. Okay, we are not vegans.
You are vegans.
No, we're not. We're all animals. That's why the idea of a meat industry is so appalling. Look at what the meat industry is doing to our planet. Look at what it's doing to other animals. Look at what it's doing to us. That's extreme. We are not vegans. They are carnists.
Why don't people like vegans?
The survivors of meat agriculture were sent to recovery centres where they were free to live out the rest of their lives and care for their children without fear of them being taken away. Years later, and the now famous Clifton Abattoir of Cumbria is amongst the least popular museums in the UK.
Each cow would be led into a stunning pen, or a restraining pneumatic pistol would be used to stun the cow. The leader would instead kill the cow, ideally before he or she recovered consciousness. Are there any questions?
How many lost their lives?
No accurate records were kept. Wasn't deemed important.
So that scene right there brings me to what I think is the most important point that I want to make here. Namely, the line, accurate records weren't kept. It wasn't deemed important. So, the number of animals that are killed by animal agriculture industry, we like to talk about that. I've made the statement, even in this presentation, the billions and billions and billions, maybe trillions of animals that are killed every year. We don't even count them all. We don't even count the number of fish. I would like to stop doing that. And here's why. The vastness of the problem is actually a distraction. So I want to do an exercise real quick. Think of three Skittles. Okay, think of 3 dots right now. Pretty easy to do, right? Now think of 4. Most of you can still think of 4 separate objects, okay? Try thinking of 5 without subdividing them into groups. Think of 5 objects. Some people can do that. A lot of people can think of 5 objects. Try it with 6. Try it with 7. Nobody in the world can visualize 8 separate objects without dividing them into parts. Try it. Try thinking of 8 dots or whatever in your mind. You can't do it, can you? Without dividing them into groups of 2 or groups of 4, you can't think of 8 things at the same time. And that's important. It's actually, and animal shelters know this, you're actually more likely to get donations for an animal shelter if you show a picture of one animal than all of the animals in your shelter that you can help. So I'm going to show a clip from a few years ago from downtown Vancouver, I think a Cube of Truth, that makes this so important to talk about. This is Dr. Matthew Nagra talking with some person.
When you show me this to me, you want that piece over.
Yeah, we want this over, yeah.
But you show me this to me, it will not over because people will, for also, for the time, for me, only me, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so
You can say, yeah, we can do it one by one and that will give a great difference. But that's impossible because there are a lot of selfish people.
So what that guy is saying, I know he's a little bit hard to understand, is that even if I go vegan, even if I stop eating meat, it's not going to save all these animals that we're seeing. And that is true. Now, we used to, I think these are the answers that Matthew Nagra gave. Veganism is growing so quickly. Everyone who goes vegan sets an example to others, therefore it might be an exponential increase. The more people go vegan, the more people will become vegan. I would like to stop saying that, because there's a so much more effective answer to that objection, and that is to return the focus on the individual, meaning both the individual person that you're talking about, their responsibility, and the next animal that they're going to eat. Now, this is the part of the presentation I'm worried about. I might not be able to get through this part, but this is Isla. He's one of 2 rabbits that I adopted almost exactly a year ago in December. Here's the first day I brought her home. That's her walking out of the carrier that I bought. She's adopted from Rabbit Jacks, by the way, from Richmond. Here she is playing with Snow. The other one is Morgan there. So, one thing that meat eaters sometimes say to me, and this is something that they very quickly regret saying, is that, and this is something that a particular type of meat eater will say, the kind that wants to see themselves as an animal lover, they will say the animals that we use for food are not the same as my cat or my dog. These animals were bred for meat. And this was the case with Isla. She's a New Zealand white rabbit. They were bred for meat and for fur. Despite the name of the breed, they were bred in California. Isla was surrendered by a facility in Coquitlam that we don't know why. It became unprofitable for some reason. It got out of hand. There might have been a disease going around. She always showed the trauma of being in that situation. Understandable. She would let me pet her sometimes. She had free reign of my room, but she would only stay in certain areas, and she was always afraid of me. And every person, except for a few times where she would come up to me. And also a few times like this, where she and Morgan would really get along. They would groom each other. That's her grooming, and that would happen more often. But once in a while, she would ask, and he would groom her as well. Now, it's great. I only had her for about 6 months before. She always had respiratory problems from where she came from. She ultimately choked while she was eating. I practiced as far as this wouldn't happen, but it didn't work. Yeah, so I just won't watch the video. So yeah, she died a few months ago, but the fact remains is she had those experiences that an animal that would be raised for food would never have. That if she was always at that facility where every minute of her life was controlled by someone who intended to kill her for food, those moments would have never happened. And that's why I say animal agriculture is not an atrocity. It is many, many, many atrocities. Every single animal that is killed just because some meat eater would rather have a hamburger than a falafel sandwich or all the food that we eat, that's an atrocity. And so this is the advancement that I'm trying to promote. Even Anonymous for the Voiceless doesn't really promote this, because a lot of activists, a lot of great activists, don't take it personally like I do. And maybe they're better off for it. Maybe it's better off not to start crying during a presentation like this. And the reason they do it is because they see the injustice in killing animals for food, in this whole system designed to kill unnecessarily. There's people who have never had an animal as a pet, who maybe have never even met an animal that they were close to, that are still damn good activists. But for me, obviously, it's personal. And even if you're not an animal lover, I want you to realize that every individual animal, their life is infinitely valuable to them. That's all they have. And so when somebody says that when I eat meat, or if I go vegan, it's not going to shut down the whole system. When somebody says, we're not going to get the whole world to go vegan, to end animal agriculture by getting individuals to go vegan, this is the answer I have for that. You will save lives by going vegan. You will spare lives, and that's worth absolutely everything to the animal that belongs. I don't know why this video is in here, but that's Hallmark Farms. That's right outside of, that's in Vancouver, actually, that last one. That's a chicken a few minutes away from being killed. So I think I should actually end the presentation on that, because that's the point I want to emphasize the most. Remember the individual. Remember that you as an individual, the person you're talking to about veganism, they have such a huge responsibility, because every time they sit down to eat, they're either ending a life or not. And I think that's the most important ingredient to our activism. This presentation was advertised as being a way to answer absolutely every objection, and I think that's how you do it. By derailing people from their distractions, by remembering the individual. you can answer every objection to veganism. And that's not to say that the person will go vegan as a result. That's their responsibility. Your responsibility is to get them to see things clearly. And you might get them to admit this, that they don't, in fact, care whether they're a good person or not. And they might not use those words. They might loop back on some of the objections that you have already refuted and recognize these infinite loops. Point them out even. I found it a kind of effective strategy to tell people what they're doing. You're using a distraction right now. That's a situation that has nothing to do with yours. You're obviously trying not to think about this, and they'll say, okay, well, let's just agree to disagree. Well, we don't actually disagree because we both agree on the fundamental concepts that we talked about in the beginning, that unnecessary killing is wrong. If you saw an animal that was hit by a car that can still be saved, most people would go out of their way to at least help them, take them to the vet. We don't agree. We don't disagree. People will, in their hearts, agree with everything you say. The only difference between a vegan and most non-vegans is the action, aligning your actions with your beliefs. And that's the hard part. That's the barrier that you have to get over. And so, even if you've done your responsibility to make this as clear as you possibly can, it then becomes their responsibility to act on that. And some people will, most will not. But my hope is that as veganism becomes more normal, and that's why I wanted to show those clips from Carnage Swallowing the Past. That's why that's my favorite documentary. It shows a world where veganism is normal, and it just becomes easier and easier for people to go vegan. And that's the mindset that I think you should put yourself in, that you're the one who's normal. And even though you're uncommon, your actions are uncommon, it's the world that's messed up. The world where we kill when we don't have to. We are not vegans, they are carnists. So, I think I'll end it there. So, any questions? Yeah.
That was like an amazing presentation. Like all of a sudden, I almost started crying too. Like that was so moving.
Well, then you did better than I did.
But I'm just wondering, like, how you would go about like reconciling with people, like especially like family who like are just so stubborn and really won't go vegan. Like I don't know how to reconcile with that.
That is the danger of these kinds of talks. So, when you first go vegan, your first fear might be, my family will disown me. If you're paying your tuition, they might stop doing that. You might make them so mad that they will, well, your relationship will break down because of how mad they are. And then you quickly realize that's not the risk. The risk is that your perception of them will change. These are people that you've respected all your life, all of a sudden making every excuse they can to avoid changing. And with my family, I didn't want it to be true. So what I did when they basically said they don't care, they used the I don't care line. They didn't use those exact words. They said, I'm not going to go vegan. It's too much of a sacrifice. And I asked them, these people who said that, can you think of a time in your life where you have sacrificed, you've made your life less comfortable or less convenient for the good of others? And actually they weren't able to answer that. And that's where the conversation ended. It's actually where all conversations with that person ended. So I don't have an answer that I have an answer. You might not like the answer. That's what happened with me and my family. Not my whole family. I visited my grandmother and them a few weeks ago. Some of this presentation was based on that most recent visit. But yeah, it can't be reconciled. You will see the worst side of people. You will see them know that they're doing something wrong, know that they're killing, and continue to do it. sorry, there's no way around that. Any more questions?
I think I'm gonna go back and retreat into my angry vegan phase now.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned something about how most activists don't focus on the individual, and like I truly think it's just a coping mechanism, or at least for me it is. Like I used to always focus on the individual animals, but now I can't because I just can't take it anymore. Like it's just so much. It's so depressing, and just, like you feel so hopeless if you're always thinking about the individual animals. Like I honestly have no idea how you do it for so many years because it's so sad that I kind of have to ignore it just a little bit to like get through life.
Yeah. Well, I think remembering the individual is a good way to prevent burnout, at least. It's hard on your heart, but for me at least, it hasn't made me want to stop doing activism. It has made me want to do it even more. The animal rights community in Vancouver is certainly smaller than it was before. I have a few conjectures as to why that is. I think activism in general is more popular. When Trump got elected, the trucker convoy has certainly given people a bad taste for protests. But I think a lot of the activism that we did in the past that I participated in too was, while done by vegans, inherently welfarist and inherently looking at the big picture and geared towards the idea that we can smash the animal agriculture industry if we just yell loud enough, if we just break enough laws, if we get angry enough. But it's not going to work that way. If you remember the individual lives that you're saving. So for me, all the activism I've done in the past 5 years, I'm only sure that I've gotten one person to go vegan. There could have been others, but I only have one person who told me that it was because of something that I started, they went vegan. And even if that really is the only person, that's enough for me because that's thousands of lives saved. Even if that person went vegan for one day and then stopped being vegan, if they stopped eating animals for one day, that would have been enough to save life, and that would have been enough to be worth the 5 years of activism I've been doing. Also, about being the angry vegan, it takes some practice, but I think it's important to try as hard as you can. I violated this myself during this talk, obviously, but to take your emotions out of it, to be respectful. Now, being respectful is often very, very, very different from being polite. I do not think we should be polite, because being polite means, especially in some groups, it means lying to people. It means valuing somebody's feelings, their self-esteem, over what needs to be told, what needs to be said, what they need to understand. The most respect you can give a person is to be honest with them, even when it is to say that they're doing something wrong. Yeah?
What do you mean keep your emotions out of it?
I mean, don't always be thinking about what the most effective thing to say is. Like, you don't need to directly answer everything they say. Like, a great example is when you're arguing with someone, the tendency is to refute everything they say because that feels good to do. Like, if somebody comes up with something from the Bible to justify eating meat, you're able to like go back to the original translations or whatever and say, they didn't actually mean this when they wrote that. It feels good to do the gotchas, but in that specific example, it would be more effective to skip that argument and say, yeah, maybe the Bible does say that, maybe it doesn't, but use your eyes. Do animals act like their purpose is to die for us? Do they walk up to you when you're holding a knife? Do they lie down and let you cut their throat the way that the Quran says to? No, they don't. So refraining from the urge to meet every argument.
Maybe it's more about the ego than the emotions. Like in that case, I think it's like if you are always tempted to fight back against people, maybe it's your ego shining. You're like always wanting to win. like, for example, how your bunny just made you cry. Like,
Yeah.
that was so moving because you showed your emotions. So I guess in some cases it can be like actually.
Yeah.
Um,
But on the other hand, that will look absolutely stupid to somebody who's not an animal lover. So it depends on who you're talking to.
yeah.
But also, like, another example where emotions can be detrimental is deciding what type of activism to do. What I think is most effective to negotiate with people also doesn't feel very good because you are appealing to a sense of decency that may or may not be there. You're acknowledging that people will, as long as we can look into the future, people will always have power over animals. It will probably always be legal in our lifetimes to kill an animal for food or for any other reason. And of course the animals can't fight back, and we really can't fight for them. We can't, there really isn't anything that we can do about it. And a lot of activism is pretending that we can, invading the slaughterhouses, the disruptions, stuff like that. Some people even fantasize about waging a war against animal agriculture. No, it's not going to work that way. It would feel good to do it. It would feel good to win a war against the industry, but it would really be a war against 95% of the population, and we're not going to win that one.
That's not a very good manifestation, Michael.
That's a chilling thought.
Well, and that's why I think it's so important to remember the individual, because even if we don't make the whole world go vegan, I think that if there is a chance, it is through these conversations, through the outreach to a lesser extent, but through the one-on-one conversations. Slavery ended. When slavery ended, only 3% of people actually owned slaves, and sugar and cotton were starting to be produced elsewhere. The price of cotton, I think, was already going down by the time the Civil War started. Slavery would not have ended if 95% of people owned slaves. Segregation wouldn't have ended if most of the country believed that it should continue, like most of the country believes that animal agriculture should continue. If you ask people, should we close all slaughterhouses? Strangely, 50% of people will say yes, but through their actions, they show that they don't actually believe this. And politicians look more closely at what people are actually buying than what they're saying. So, if the animal agriculture industry ever ends, it will be through people going vegan. And even if it does not, every person who goes vegan saves lives. And these steps along the way are infinitely valuable to the ones those lives belong to. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm not like super confident I can be like as articulate as you like talking to people, but or just like any of you guys have like recommendations on like if they wanted to like kind of have a better look at
Yes.
like speakers or
Absolutely.
documentaries or whatever.
The very first recommendation I have is to go on Reddit, go on Quora, go on Facebook, argue online.
What?
Yes,
No.
yes. For many reasons.
No, watch Earthling Edge 30 days, 30
No, don't
That's
watch.
good.
So, please, others will disagree. I don't recommend watching any celebrity activist. Except for Paul Bashir, because he has, him and Asal have continuously developed. They've admitted that they're wrong in the past. I don't think, is James Aspie and Earthling Ed, are they even still?
Earthling Ed is active. Yeah,
Okay.
his 30 Reasons, like, you know the series, like 30 Days, 30 Excuses? He like basically kind of refutes like 30 different excuses. I actually liked that one so much when I was first becoming an activist that my activism mom gave it to me printed out as a grad present. So I think it's good.
Okay, yeah, and that's perfectly valid.
With an activist, if you get weirded out by, that you subject yourself to something that could possibly damage your mental health. It's maybe it doesn't sound like that for everyone, but I think that's.
It could be for some people, yeah. So, in my experience, at least, I can only speak to my own experience. Arguing online is, for one, great practice because, for one, you can take your time. You can look things up. And it's easier to type for me than it is to talk. So you can also see what works and what doesn't. People are more honest online, and maybe that's why it's more difficult, because when you're talking face to face, it's harder for the other person as well. It's harder to disagree with someone when they're standing right in front of you. You want to be more polite. You shouldn't be polite, but you want to be polite rather than being respectful. Online, you all have experienced that is not the case. You're looking at a screen, not a person. You can tell the truth and not feel as anxious about it, and the other person will do the same thing. If you say something that doesn't make sense, if you say something that looks stupid, they will tell you, and either you can easily refute that or not. Maybe you did go down a distracting path, or maybe you did say something factually inaccurate that they are going to dwell on and use to refute everything else you say in the future. You learn from that. I mean, you can learn from personal conversations too, but so many more opportunities exist online. Yeah.
I just want to say I mean, for this online, everything's recorded too. So
yes.
There's a permanent record.
Yes.
There's a whole thing. Anything that's on the internet never leaves. So if you have with talking to of course talking in person has its own thing, but I mean here you have perfectly written out what did you do, what could you have done better. Yeah.
Right. You can go back and read it, and also other people will read it.
Yeah.
So I will argue online with someone that I am absolutely sure will not change their mind, just for the sake of other people that might come and read it later. So yeah. Also, if somebody comes up, if you're talking to someone online and they come up with an objection later, they can return to the conversation and say, hey, what about this? And you can answer that. Whereas if it's somebody that you don't know that you met on the street and you're talking to them, they come up with an objection, you're not there to answer it again, that means they're not going to be vegan. So
I gotta somewhat agree with Stan though. I think it would be really taxing on your mental health.
Yeah.
I used to argue online, but it would just make me so angry,
But that might go away with practice as well. I mean, not go away, but you might learn to manage that. That's another great reason, I think, in support of arguing online, because you can get used to that feeling and you can get used to coping with it and have the time that it takes to do that. And then when you're arguing in person where you don't have time to walk away and come back, you will be more ready for it. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm just curious how you responded to that, to this post about the guy.
Sure.
Yeah, not sure.
Years ago, let's see. Yeah, I think that's actually the response. So, yeah, my only, I don't know if I said it either. Yeah, when you really kill the cat, if they say yes to all of this, then I don't think I did this conversation, this was 3 years ago, ask them, what is your purpose in life? Because when we've gotten to this point, it's pretty rare that somebody will be this honest. And these are actually the conversations that I want because they're being so honest. And so now we get to big picture questions. What is your purpose in life? Is it really to just experience all the pleasure and comfort that you can for yourself and to hell with everybody else? Maybe it is. Maybe you found a real sociopath. For most people, they at least like to pretend that it isn't. Ask them, has there ever been a time where you've gone out of your way to help someone else, even if it inconvenienced you? This is another one of those times. This is the biggest change that you can make for others. And if you're consistent with any kind of morality, then you will go vegan. So that might not be how I did respond to this, but it is how I should have. And actually, to answer what you said about mental health, I take back what I said before. You're absolutely right. I think I am worse off mentally because of this. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind.
It's an interesting point though that like if you like learn how to control your anger while fighting online, then you'll be more effective in person.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I can kind of see that, and like I have learned what not to do by arguing online. I just don't know if I would recommend that to others, but at the same time, like I'm just one activist, so I don't know what.
Yeah. These are all hypotheses I'm making here. Try it and let me know how it goes.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so confused on how you would have answered like you causing harm on like things that aren't really like vegan. Because before I was like, oh, you have an iPhone, or like
Mhm.
I don't know how to respond to that. Like I do feel like bad, but like I really don't know what to say. Like,
Yeah. Another question that somebody asked the last time I gave this talk was, what about people who say, well, you're pro-choice, right? You think abortion should be legal. Why do you think that and not this? So in all of these cases, it's actually the magnitude of the problem that matters. So you buy a smartphone maybe once every 3 years. In my case, it's always a used one. And this smartphone has a trace amount of pig fat in it. So you're responsible for 0.000% of a pig's death once every 3 years. Also, animals are not killed for gelatin and for the cholesterol that gets put into capacitance detectors in the smartphone touchscreens. They're killed primarily for meat and dairy and eggs. And so you're not really increasing the demand. But why did this person ask that? Is it because they do see that it's wrong?
She was just telling me, she was like, I just try to like live my life as best as I can, and I'm like super critical of myself, and I notice you're not as critical of yourself as you are, but you keep like pushing like people to be vegan, and I'm like,
Well, okay, let's talk about, honestly, what would happen if you stopped buying smartphones, which maybe you should do. I mean, maybe you should only repair smartphones when they break somehow, but usually it's the screen that gets replaced. But what would happen if you didn't do that? You probably use the phone to do activism. You must be doing something in your life to help others that the phone is helping with. Maybe the answer is that you should never buy a smartphone again. The difference between vegans and other people is that when we see a consistent, rational argument for changing, we actually make the change. That's why there's such an intersection between zero-waste people and vegans. That's why there's such an intersection between environmentalists and vegans. People who ride bikes instead of driving cars and vegans, or at least have electric cars or hybrids. Because when you see a problem, you should work to stop participating in that. And so let's get back to the conversation that we were having. There's not a real reason that you can't go vegan. You won't lose anything really by going vegan. You're just afraid of the change. And by doing so, you will spare hundreds of animals a premature death. And just focus on that too. Yeah? Or I think
Side
you.
note. There's like new smartphone companies, one of which is called Fairphone, so you can get like
Yeah.
more ethical smartphones.
oh my god, that one was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Buying a smartphone is not inherently anti-vegan. There is gelatin in film for a film campus. That doesn't mean being a photographer is inherently anti-vegan or will inherently